How do you know that God, how do you know God cares for you? How do you know? And on the reverse, how does God know that you care for him? I want you to turn in your phones to Exodus chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16. What do you do when you are starving? What do you do when you are really, really starving? I'll tell you what I do. I get in my car and I drive to the nearest In-N-Out. And every road trip that I'm on, my eyes and my stomach are searching the horizon for that sign in the sky, that yellow arrow pointing me into the direction of my promised land. When I spot one, I quickly and skillfully exit the freeway, park, jump out of my car, run up through the doors to that smiling face that always greets you when you go there, and I order French fries, animal style, of course, and 2 double-doubles. And for me, double-double means double lettuce, double tomato on a grilled cheese. Did you know they do that? They give you double lettuce, double tomato for free. For free. Maybe you don't care that they give you that for free, but I do, and it's delicious. But what do you do if you're on a road trip and as you're driving, there's no In-N-Out? Perish the thought. What do you do when there's no Taco Bell either? What do you do when you're driving for mile after mile and there's no Fazoli's, no Chipotle, no Del Taco, as far as the eye can see, and your stomach begins to twist again, and that pain rumbles your stomach as you pass each off-ramp. And after what seems like days, you finally break down and you cry out, "Fine, fine, I'll just have Subway." First world problems, right? But what would you do if you were actually starving? What would you do if you were actually starving? Not, "Oh, I skipped breakfast this morning, but I've been walking for days. I've been hungry for days, and I'm worried about my kids getting food." There's a story of the Israelites as they set out after the Red Sea experience, with the song of Moses on their lips, singing, "Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders?" And their hearts were filled with the glory and power of their God and of all the wonderful works that he had just done for them. But then a couple of days later, as their food rations begin to get low and then completely run out, and their full hearts begin to be drowned out by the turning of their empty stomachs, battling real hunger, and their singing began to turn to complaining. In Exodus chapter 16, verse 2, we see that the Israelites said, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death." They sound a little hangry to me. The Israelites, while in Egypt, although they had been slaves, they were living in the center of the known world at that time. The center of the world. They could get anything they could think of. They could get steak. They could get carne asada. They could get bulgogi. They could get fried chicken. They could get anything they wanted. But now they had nothing. They're out in the desert, and they felt that they were going to die. What about the evidence that of God's power that they had just seen? What about that evidence that was all so fresh in their minds? They sure remembered the pots of Egypt, but how quickly they forgot how terrible their lives had been in that slavery. And they forgot how the plagues had stopped before they came and when they fell on the Egyptians. They forgot about how their own firstborns were saved, and they forgot how they had been freed from being slaves in perpetual bondage. And they forgot the way that God had made a way through the heart of the sea for them to cross, and then that the same had brought to nothing their perpetrators in one night with one slap of those walls of water coming together. They forgot. And instead of singing the song, all they talked about was how hard it was to walk on the desert sand. They saw and they felt only their present suffering, and they forgot what God had done for them. And by saying that it would have been better if they had died by the hand of the Lord in Egypt, they were saying that those that the Lord had killed were better off than the ones that the Lord had saved. Verse 4, Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. God explained why they were suffering in hunger. It was to test them, to see if they would obey him or not, to see what was in their hearts. Did they need to be tested in their faith to suffer like that? Yes, because they needed proof, and God needed proof. Verse 6, So Moses and Aaron said to the Israelites, In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us? Moses also said, You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses told Aaron, Say to the entire Israelite community, Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked towards the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. Proof. The people wanted proof, and God gave it to them. He answered them by providing for them, and then, when they sat back that evening, all fat and full, they would know that God, what the Lord was their God. Verse 13. That evening, quail came and covered the camp. Not kale, quail. Wild, delicious quail came and covered the camp. And in the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, What is this? What is it? Manna in Hebrew. What is it? For they didn't know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need." Verse 19, then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Verse 21, each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left, and keep it until the morning." So they saved it until the morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. That's a good thing. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. God let them suffer hunger for 3 days in the wilderness, because this was to be a test, to see what was in their heart, what was going on in their heart. God wanted proof, so they had to be tested. And so some, when they saw the manna, that there was bread on the ground, they went out and said, "Food!" And so they collected as much as they needed, and they went home and they ate, but not all of it. They willfully suffered a little bit of starvation because they didn't know maybe tomorrow there wouldn't be bread tomorrow. And so they saved it over. But when they saved it, it bred maggots. And so they didn't trust. Yeah, we know that he said he's promised to give us tomorrow bread, but what if God goes back on his promise? What if God doesn't do what he said? I better prepare for myself. This is a hoarder mentality, worrying about tomorrow for what you will eat. But distrusting God's promises and relying on ourselves will do nothing for us but wreak something nasty tomorrow. Then, on the 7th day, still others who had seen God's regularity of providing for their needs each day neglected to prepare for his holy day, and they went out and found nothing waiting for them on Sabbath morning, and their fridge was empty. Why would you doubt when you had so much evidence that God is faithful from your past? Verse 28. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. He has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." And verse 30, they finally get it. So the people rested on the 7th day. And from that point on, they had food. They had food. They never suffered hunger again. And can I suggest that in life, it is not in the gathering, it is not in the resting, but the whole of life's lessons are in the trusting and acting on what God has told you. Proof. They wanted proof. So they looked out, and there was God's glory shining from the cloud. They wanted proof. And so when they woke up in the morning, there was bread lying all around the camp. But God wanted proof too. And God looked out, and there were people hoarding manna as though he wouldn't provide again tomorrow as he had promised. And God wanted proof, and he looked out, and there were people seeking to gather on the Sabbath as though they didn't care about the command that he had given them. So what about me? The people were hungry, and God gave them manna to eat. The test isn't just in the hunger, but it's also in the blessing. What will I do with what God gives to me? When God gives me money, he's asked me to give him 10% of it. What will I do? If God were to give me someone special, would I preserve her purity until we commit our lives to each other? Proof. He wants proof. Verse 31, the people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." Verse 34, as the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law so that it might be preserved. Today, we still say manna. What is it? What was it? Really now, what was it? It says, we don't know what it is. It says that it was a color of coriander seed, which is a color of light khaki. It says that it tasted like cakes baked with honey. Another place in the Bible says it tasted like cakes baked with oil. What was it? Glazed donuts. It also says that it was there in the morning and yet melted away under the heat of the sun. It had the nutrients to sustain a person healthfully for 40 years with relatively few external sources of food. Manna? What is it? The end of this chapter, as we just read, it says that God said to keep a jar of it. Keep a jar of it to show the future generations of what he did, how he provided for his people in the desert. And Aaron put it next to the tablets of the covenant in the ark of the covenant. The ark is lost today. But this verse right here is one of the reasons why I think someday the ark will be found. And they will open it up, and we will all see that God did provide something miraculous for his people. And there will be proof. There will be proof of God's love, proof of his glory. He will prove himself, and someday he will prove himself blatantly to the entire world. But in the meantime, will you prove yourself to him? You're probably asking yourself now, why is Branden preaching for a month and a half about the children of Israel and them going through hard times in life? It's because hard times, they will come. Hard times will come, and when they do, what will you do? The story of the Israelites, is it your story too? It's mine. How much faith do I have when God guides me into a corner? How much trust do I display in God's care for me when I see nothing but sand? We are here on this planet, and here there is pain and suffering and things that we want that we may never have. But we do have a Father in heaven who loves us. And I wonder, how do my reactions in the hard times as a child of God, a professed child of God, how do they make God feel? The next time I find myself in pains of want, will In pains that when the darkness closes in, as we sang, will the words that come out of my mouth be, or will they be, blessed be the name of the Lord, blessed be your glorious name. You have done so much for me.